Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is what's hot in Dynamics. You're now joining your hosts, Ashley Steiner and Merlin Schweiger. You can talk about your tiny Airbnb.
Oh my gosh, it's so small.
While you're waiting for your house to be built.
Like Panther will be on one end and meow, and then take 5 steps to the other end and then meow, as if this place isn't big enough for this tiny little cat.
Hey, Panther needs a space, He's a wild animal. He needs to.
I think it has more to with I can always see him, so because I'll bother him just all the time. There's no privacy. He's a cat. He needs his own privacy.
Right. He's like a teenage child, You gotta have your own space.
Grumpy old man is what he is. I have made best friends with the dog next door, though. They have a beagle, and they have a chain link fence on part of their fence, and he'll come over and he'll sit up on the fence and and I'll pet him through the fence, and he'll stick his little nose through. I think I'm gonna steal it when I leave. That dog is adorable.
How's Panther feel about that?
Well, the dog lives outside, so Panther would never have to see the dog because I could just set him up in my backyard and when I get a house.
But Panther's gonna smell the dog on you and know that you're petting another animal.
Well, he knows now.
Yeah.
Well, he'll know. He knows.
How does he feel about it now?
He knows because he can hear me talking to the dog, and he'll sit by the door and wait for me to come in. But Panther is never that excited to see me. That dog did zoomies around the yard. Panther's oh, hey, you're home. What'd you bring me? Oh, a plastic sack? Let me lick it.
Typical cat.
I feel so bad. I love my cat.
I understand, but if you wanted excited zoomies when you come home, you got the wrong kind of pet.
That's true, but I think it'd get old. I think the reason I like that dog so much is because it's in their yard, not mine. I don't have to take care of it. Mm-hmm. I love animals. I love all animals. But I really love dogs when they belong to other people.
It's totally fair. Totally fair.
So Project Apps.
So Project Operations.
Have you have you explored it at all?
A little bit. So I spent some time looking into Project Operations about a year and a half ago or so. I got into how to set up projects a little bit, not the selling opportunity part of the setup, but now that I have a project, I need to set up some tasks and assign some resources and then kind of look at stuff from there. I did a little bit of that. It was mostly just enough so that I could demo the product, but not enough that I could have actually set it up to do anything. And as it was, I never got the utilization report to work because apparently you got to set other stuff up that I never set up. And so then it all showed all zeros. And so then my demo, I just threw in a screenshot from the internet that I found of the report. I was oh, that'll have to do. So I spent a little bit of time there. That's it. Like I said, I didn't look into the sales setup stuff, which I understand can be both a little bit complicated and also a little bit powerful. And certainly never looked into the integration to F&O. I don't know if that's something that you've done either. But
you can also integrate it into BC.
That's where my expertise stops. Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Just for people, it's not just F&O, because I've heard people say that a lot, oh, integrate it into F&O, but it's more than just that, which I think is good for people to know. I am by no means an expert. I'm going to totally put a disclaimer on all of this. I am no expert. There's a lot of people out there who do a lot with Project Apps. I've thrown out a ton of questions to people. I've been working, I guess we're talking about this because we're kind of just exploring all the different modules and apps, and I guess it's considered a first party app, right? Project Apps?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So I think that we've always kind of done deep dives on this, and I don't think we've ever talked about this one now I'm on a project for it, so I think it's easy to talk about it. So yeah, so what you were talking about, like project ops, I mean, like in its simplest form, you think of it as like a project management system, right? So like, how do you sell service-based work, whether that's like consulting or like anytime, anywhere that you're going to have like some sort of service to offer people. And you can connect that sales process and like what you're quoting, whether it's time and materials or it's fixed fee. And then you can take that all the way through the project management process or the project process. So you can, like you said, talk about utilization, figure out, were you accurate in your quoting? Did you make any money on your fixed fee? Things like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, you'd want to know that, but a lot of people have a hard time calculating it.
Hmm. I believe that.
So it's pretty cool. It's very different as somebody who has never somebody as myself has never dove into the project management process and is not a project manager. It's actually been kind of difficult to understand. So I've had to do actually a lot of, I would say, research just myself on like what that process and like how a project manager would work, and actually sit down with a couple project managers I know and say, hey, what would you want in this stage, or like how do you calculate things like that. So it's difficult, man. I love how you're like, oh, I've never set it up, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like it's so difficult because it's there's a lot to it. So they take when Microsoft built Project Ops, or when they bought it from whatever company they bought it from, because we all know that a lot of this comes from acquisitions and things like that. They took a lot of the existing tables like an order and turned that into a contract,
Hmm.
which has its own complications because orders work in a certain way, but they've made JavaScript changes to it that you can't adjust because it's part of the innate functionality of PO. And we have found this in multiple places. The contracts is one specific one, but there's been a lot of things where we've wanted to change like just basic I mean what I would consider basic configuration, but it's built into the native JavaScript and you can't touch it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not helpful.
Well, it's not. Um, and so you just wonder if Microsoft, I mean, they're never going to uncouple that, right? But it does limit some of the customization that you can do from like a process standpoint. So you kind of have to work in project management the way Microsoft thinks project management should be done. Like I think in sales, you can change process. Like you can either do accounts and contacts first or second. Like there's a lot of flexibility, and that's one of the things that they've always prided themselves on, is that you can make it, it's so customizable. You can make it what you want it to be. Project Ops is not the same way, or at
Right.
least that's what I'm finding out.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Does it make sense?
My impression of the history, yeah, sort of. My impression of the history is, I think actually Microsoft built it. Um, if I'm remembering correctly, I think they took the like project accounting people out of the AX team and had them build what was then Project Service Automation (PSA) on top of CRM. And then because they had that, and then they had Project Online, and they had like Project the desktop app, and they had I think something else in the cloud, and they were like, we're just going to smash all this together and come up with something that does all of this mostly end to end, and that became Project Operations. So I think you can actually blame Microsoft developers for which is one of those things that like has bugged me that Microsoft has done over time, is don't do things to your product that I can't do to your product also. Like there's so many ways to extend the product. If you're going to extend your own product, just do it in a way that I can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leaves that customizability and flexibility open. When you go in like hard code JavaScript stuff that then I can't change, like that's not fair. That's not playing by the rules. I can't do that, so you can't do that either.
It's so true because I mean, because we've come across this where, I mean, I can see right in the JavaScript where it is. And so I went to Microsoft directly and said, hey, this is the portion of JavaScript that I have an issue with. Can you change it? Can I, like, what is your recommendation? And they said nothing. Like, you can't do anything. Like, we can't customize it per customer. And like, you can do it, but then your whole system is going to break, and that's unsupported, and we can't help you fix it. And so it was just crazy because like you can see exactly where the JavaScript is written so logically that you can actually see where you want to change something, but you just can't. It's so frustrating. Um, but I would say so now I'm talking, I always like to start with the things that I hate about stuff first with Microsoft. But the things that are kind of cool, I would say let's kind of switch gears maybe into that. Um, you brought up
Sure.
Project Online. So it does have a really deep and I wouldn't even call it an integration. It's embedded. So Project Online is like 100% embedded into Project Ops. And I don't know how recent that is. I know it's newer, and I think it was part of PO and not PSA.
Hmm.
But it basically embeds Project Online directly into Dynamics. So you're not working with like multiple tables and then you can't transfer that over to project. Like, you can actually build the project in PO, go to Project Online, and like do a bunch of stuff there, and then it'll transfer back into PO. And I know from like a project manager's perspective, they don't like CRM. Nobody likes CRM. So they could go in and build things, but as soon as that base of the project is there, they can then go build all their tasks, do their assignments, notes, dates, all of that. They can do that in Project Online, which is not at all confusing that they're both PO, Project Operations, and Project Online. You can go do that in Project Online and then come back to PO and have it'll generate those numbers like you were talking about, um, the utilization or the profitability, things like that.
I think one of the coolest things, at least from my limited discovery into project operations, was the like trying to find a resource for your task. And so like I would say like set up the task and be like, okay, I need these skill sets at this level to be able to do this task with this much availability. And then it could go and like, look at theoretically hundreds of resources and say, all right, now here are 5
Mm-hmm.
that have the availability, the skill set, the whatever else that you need, and you can like pick one, and then it'll like automatically book them for all that time. And I was like, that seems pretty cool.
It is cool. I would say the interface of that is not pretty. Um,
Yeah.
Again, of course, like I have to come back to to complain about something. But what I do know is that Microsoft is investing a lot of money in field service, and a lot of the features between field service and project operations are similar, like the schedule board,
Hmm.
the resource board, all of that kind of stuff is I wouldn't say the same, very similar. And I've heard rumblings that they're gonna potentially roll out some of that like interface stuff down to Project Ops. I don't know if it's true. That's not a secret. Like, I've just been talking with other people who use PO, and we're like, why else, why wouldn't they, right? If it's here, of
Right.
course they're going to roll it over. We've actually started using the field service schedule board just because it's so much easier to use. There's just additional stuff on it that we don't need in PO,
Sure.
but you can't, I mean, obviously you can use it both ways. But yeah, like you were saying, it is really cool where you can go in and just identify what the need is, time frame, all those kinds of things. And in the schedule board, it'll just show you who fits that criteria. And you can, what I also like is you can so let's say pulled back 5 people and you were like, well, actually, I want to split this work between 2 of them because it's too much work for one person to do, or, whatever the schedule just worked out. You can allocate how much of the project or how much of the work you want to go to each person. You can either front load them, you can do it even, you can give them half of it, full, all of it, a percentage if you want to split it between 4 people and give them each 25%. It's actually pretty cool, how you can break it down, between all the resources, especially like if you need to front load somebody. Like, if you think about it, when you're doing a project, you might have somebody that's doing design. Well, you're not going to do
Right.
design at the end of the project, and if you are, you're in trouble. So that's like the kind
Right.
of thing that you'd want to front load their hours and then have it decrease as the project goes. So it does all of that for you. You can also accommodate for like different scheduling. Like, I'm off on Fridays, so we have me off on Friday, so I don't ever get scheduled time. So when we look at my availability and resourcing, well, I only have so many hours because I don't work 40 hours a week. So it's very intelligent in the way that you can, scope and kind of put together what's realistic for somebody's workload. And you can also find out what capacity they're at. So one of the things that I really like is you can find out scheduling and utilization, which are two very different concepts. So scheduling is, what does somebody have available coming up? And utilization is, well, how much did I actually utilize that person? So I said that they were available at 80% capacity, but we only filled them at 55. I'd want to know that, because I'd want to know how can I give them, that 25 more percent work to get them up to full capacity.
Have you gotten into like how you estimate things on the sales front? Like how, I'm not sure how flexible that is because that's an area I haven't used.
Yeah, so the sales side is actually not, I don't want to say it's not complex, because it's going to come back and bite me in the ass, right? Of like later, oh gosh, this is difficult. The hardest part of setting up the sales is all of the data that you have to load up front. You have to load all of your resources, your pricing. You have to have multiple price lists. You have to have a price list for the company. You have to have, like, there's so much data that you have to upload up front that you don't realize until you're like halfway through the quote and you're like, why are like the number 80 hours for this one resource, why is it not calculating? Oh, it's because I forgot to add this one price list to this one resource back in this other spot. And then you have to go and do it all over again, because Microsoft doesn't, you can't just hit like recalculate. Like, you have to delete that entry out of your quote and then re-add it. Project Ops is easy to use. It's hard to set up, because because the hardest part is knowing all the data that you have to put into it, because obviously that has a lot to do with then the project too. You can't tell what somebody's utilizing if you don't put in their availability, and if they're not doing time entry, and if they're not, you don't put in their price.
Yeah.
So it all has to do with the amount of data. You can make it as easy, you could roll it out as is, make no customizations, and you could still spend hundreds of hours just finding out what data you have to put in to make it all work. Like you said, you couldn't get the reports to work. The reports are really cool, but the amount of data, and I'm not even kidding, like we'll find something, like we're still finding things, like this one thing isn't calculating, and we have to like go so far deep into the system to find out, oh, we forgot to upload a price list here. And there's no, I don't want to say there's no documentation, but I mean, I have found it very difficult to find documentation of, here's all, like, here are the 10 data points of things that you need for this to even work. Which sounds like it would be a really great, maybe I should have come prepared with that for today, like a list of all those things. Maybe I'll follow up like a blog or something. Like, here are all the things.
That sounds like a blog post that you then sell back to Microsoft so that they can put it in their just documentation.
Yeah, or just a link to it. Would love the traffic.
Yeah,
but it's true. So yeah, I would say the hardest part of Project Ops is, so to go back to your question on like the quoting, I would say it's not any more or less difficult than quoting like just in the sales. It is a different opportunity because it has to be listed as a services opportunity, not a product-based opportunity. So if you're going to use a custom app, be really careful of that. Because you have to select the right kind of opportunity, because by default Microsoft or CRM or whatever, Dynamics will always use the product based one, so you have to like change that. Now if you just use the PO app, no problem, it automatically chooses it for you. But then there's this whole, you have the quote, which then becomes an order, but in PO it becomes a contract, which then you have to put in all of your quote line details, and you have to create a quote line for like every person that's going to be on the project, for every resource.
So this ties back to something that I think I encountered when I was trying to demo it, is that there's no concept of like a project template. I feel like that was something that was maybe in PSA and then got taken out for Project Ops.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have not implemented project templates. The customer I'm working with decided every project is unique.
Okay.
So I did not get too far down the path, but you might be right that it's not there anymore.
Okay.
I don't know the answer.
It's like from your description of like having to set up different line items for everybody that's on the project. Like if I'm setting up a 3,000 hour project to span over 18 months, with like I don't know, 25 different resources.
Well, you could do it by role, right? So let's say you
Okay.
out of those 25 resources, there's really only 6 roles. Okay, that at least breaks
Okay.
it down. So you can do it either by resource or by role. Because you
Okay.
might have
All right.
resources in the same role that cost different money. Then maybe you use a blended rate. It just kind of depends on how your company wants to operate
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Right. It still sounds like a lot of data entry compared to, just put it in a spreadsheet and add rows and columns wherever you want.
You can import it all. So, I mean, you could still do your spreadsheet and then import all your contract lines and quote lines and yeah,
I suppose, as long as I put them all in the right format. But
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, people always think of it as like, oh, the opportunity becomes a contract and then that becomes a project. That's not true. Microsoft wants you to create the project while you're still in the opportunity. So you can start to kind of build what the project would look like. But then let's say that you close the opportunity as lost. This is one thing that I actually found really cool. I was like, you know what? Kudos to you, Microsoft, for thinking of this. So you build all of that, right? You have your opportunity, your quote, you build the project to connect it all together. You kind of start to envision what the full project would look like, fill in details. Let's say you lose that opportunity, it goes in and deactivates everything. So any projects, project tasks, any assigned roles, everything gets removed from the system, like so that the any sort of like soft bookings that you did on resources,
Mm-hmm.
those go away. It's actually pretty cool. I was shocked when I came back to Microsoft and was like, why doesn't this like just go here? They're like, well, you should already have it built. And I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, because I mean because I get it, right? When you're doing the quote, you want to soft book resources. Hey, I have this project that could be
Right.
coming down the pipeline. I want to make sure that I'm soft booking people to know when we could fit it in. But if we lose it,
Mm-hmm.
you want that you don't have to go into every soft booking and remove it. Which is actually, yeah, I found that very surprising that they thought that through.
Well, I'm glad that they did.
Yeah.
Glad that they did.
The last thing I wanted to talk about was time entry, unless you have any other questions.
Oh yeah, I was actually wondering about time entry. I feel like that's the last frontier.
Actually, the 2 projects that I worked on to roll out PO, the need came from needing a time entry system. So, but they chose it because it integrated with sales and then eventually to the project, so it was just a very seamless, but it was time entry driven. Like, hey, we need a place where we can enter time easily that has all this like backward and, impact. Time entry is really easy if you do it how Microsoft wants you to. This sounds terrible, but but it's like everything else, right? Everything in PO is if you use it as Microsoft intends and you do no customization or you change your process to follow how Microsoft thinks that you should input time, it's actually really slick and pretty cool because all of your time gets put towards projects. It feeds right into the utilization or even the costs. So you have an estimate cost on your project and then you have an actual cost. So you can do comparison as the project is going. It just updates as soon as time gets approved. It automatically updates everything. So that is really cool, especially as a PM where you're trying to find out if you're over or under budget or if you're,
Mm-hmm.
do I need a change order because we're spending too much money? You get, I would say, pretty, as long as people are approving time in a timely manner, you're getting really up-to-date information. What I don't like necessarily is how Microsoft implemented like holidays and vacation. So I just warn people, if you are going to, use PO as for for time entry, you can put in a calendar. We're going to talk about customer service as well. So I'm guessing in customer service, there's a service calendar. Same thing in
Mm-hmm.
project ops. It's kept the name of service calendar where people have when they're available to work, what their working hours are. Let's say you're part-time, full-time, whatever. Microsoft wants you to put in your holidays on there and not in your time entry. So, this person just can't be booked for any projects on this day. But as a manager, I want to be able to look at somebody's week and say, hey, there was a holiday on Monday. are you at 40 hours? Or are you, because you're an hourly employee, are you at 45 even with taking the holiday? So I still owe you overtime. So the way that
Mm,
Microsoft built it is they don't want you to put in holidays on time entry. But as a manager, I need to know because if your salary, it doesn't, it doesn't matter, right? You can work 100 hours, you're going to make the same as if you work 30. But if you're an hourly employee, you'd want to be able to see, or you'd want to be able to see how much time they really put towards the project, or are we giving too many holidays and losing money, or should we give more holidays because our people are overworked, or, so there's, I would say it's, I'm not a fan of it just from a manager perspective. I get where Microsoft is coming, like, oh, it's a holiday, you just don't work. Well, but
right.
I want to know how many hours somebody is, with the 8 hours of holiday, So I would
Yeah.
just, that's one thing I would caution people about is, how you want, because then do you book holidays towards a project, which kind of doesn't make sense because it's not chargeable time. Um,
And you just make a holiday project that's a non-billable project.
but you can only add 20 people per task. So that is a project online limitation. You can only
Oh,
assign 20 people to one project task. So let's say you have a company of 100 people, you want to create a holiday or a time off project, you can only assign 20 people to one of the tasks. Now, you could just require that they don't put in a task when they submit time, but yeah, just a lot to think
hmm.
about and things like lessons learned. Like these are all things that I wish I would have known walking in. I would have made
Yep.
different recommendations up front.
That sounds fair.
I think those are the big areas I would say. The sales opportunity, contracts, that portion, projects, and then time entry. Um, I'll end this the way that I started. I am by no means an expert. I learn something new and different every day with project ops. I've been working on it since like August, so I'm 5 months in, and there's a lot I wish I would have known, like I said, before this. But I feel like that's how you learn is by doing. So, would love to hear from other people who have done project ops projects and like what they've learned, or like I think that would be a really good like to see in the comments, like what else, what tips and tricks, or what are things that you think people should know before doing one of these implementations. Because in my opinion, project operations is going to be pretty big. It's going to be like field service, where there's a lot of people moving to field service. I hear a lot of people are looking into project operations, especially because of the integration with Project Online and doing the time entry, and the fact that it's not a part of AX or FNO, like it's its own separate
Hmm.
platform. So let's say you don't have a Microsoft ERP system, you can still integrate it. Like you could integrate it into Oracle or SAP or something like that. So
Yeah.
I'm finding that a lot of people are looking into it. And so yeah, I think that helping if we could all help each other, because I think it's gonna be pretty big in the next couple of years.
Makes sense. Have to start up a project ops support group for
We should.
everybody to share their tips.
It's almost like creating a project ops user group.
Hmm. If only there was a platform where you could set up like a meetup that you could hang out on a regular basis.
I think we just
Hmm.
came up with something good.
Could be. Could be.
Anything else? I know I feel like I just rambled a lot. Obviously, this was a topic I wanted to bring to the
No,
table and kind of share at
and
least what I've learned so far.
I mean, and you're much closer to being an expert in it than I am, so this is mostly for me to learn.
Yeah, I would never put expert next to my name on PO specifically, but learning, maybe expert in progress.
How about you're advanced and I am novice? There's still more
I'll
levels
take the
beyond advanced.
compliment. I'll take the compliment. Now you know for the next
I
time you
can't think
build a
of anything.
demo how to get your numbers. And I'll follow. I will follow this up. I think that's a good idea. Maybe put together a blog or something of here are like the 10 or 12 data points. Like don't forget to put these in when you're setting up PO. I think that's a good idea.
Sounds like valuable content.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your expertise. I'm putting that in air quotes just for you, but
Thanks, Marlon.
for sharing your expertise today.
Absolutely. I appreciate everyone listening and excited to see the conversation that comes out of this.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.